In 1945, inventor and engineer Vannevar Bush came up with a hypothetical device called Memex. A Memex would be able to store all sorts of information which could then be connected directly to our memory. No such machine has ever been built, which is probably for the best. Anyway, this is a new series I'm trying out called Anime You Can't Ignore, a series about anime which has some sort of message in it which I think people should be listening to. And our first episode is about Serial Experiments Lain. Serial Experiments Lain follows 14-year-old girl Lain Iwakura as she delves into the world of the Wired. The Wired is a complex concept, but I'll do my best to explain it. I suppose you could say the Wired is a combination of the internet, the Matrix, AR, VR, the metaverse, and Sword Art Online. The relationship between the real world and the Wired is intentionally left unclear. People slowly get consumed by the Wired, unable to tell where the real world ends and the digital world begins, to the point where people kill themselves so they can live solely within the Wired. Now, we've all seen predictions from the late 1990s about how the internet will turn out, and they're hilarious. They got so much wrong that you wonder what their line of thought was. Serial Experiments Lain is not like any of these predictions. The amount they got right about the internet is honestly scary, and as time moves forward, even more of Lane's plot becomes true. It's honestly terrifying that in 1998 they foresaw the takeover of the internet before half of the population had even heard of it. To say Serial Experiments Lain was ahead of its time would be an understatement. I'm sure if Lain had been created 24 years later in 2022, people in 2046 would think, yeah, that show was ahead of its time. Over the course of the 21st century, we're going to see a Lain-like takeover of the world. A world where it's impossible to tell what's real and what is virtual. A world where reality is irrelevant and death is just a metaphor in the most literal sense. A world where any person can become God, with no one to stop them from doing evil things. A world where our minds are no longer our own, but that of our virtual overlords. Throughout the series, we get a good look into the psychology of our main character. She becomes more and more mentally ill as time goes on and starts to create multiple personalities in the Wired, completely different from her own. I've got to say, I've seen a lot of people like that on Discord. Relatively speaking, the internet is a very new concept. You might think that since it's already taken over the world, or it's been around for 30 years, that makes it out of its infancy, but think of the internet like telephones. The first commercial telephone entered the market in 1877. Seldom do we think about telephones before 1950 and what importance they held. In the mid-22nd century, we aren't going to think about this era of the internet, and that's why it's vital we take control before it's too late. You might think that what I'm saying isn't the true intent of the creator of the show, or that I'm just looking into things too deeply, but that's not really important. What is important is that we take a step back and take a look at our world and the route it's going down, and take a look at Lane's world and the route it came from. I don't think they're two separate routes. They're one and the same, but they don't have to be. Serial Experiments Lain serves as a warning we all need to listen to. Anime fan or not, everyone who uses the internet or uses technology needs to watch Lain. Everyone needs to know what kind of world we will end up living in if we don't take a step back and take a look at the new world humanity is building for itself. Are we really building a world that serves all people, or are we just building a cyberpunk dystopia? And would you rather live for an eternity in a virtual world, or live knowing that you 100% exist in a real one? That's a decision we might be all making sooner than we think.